Welcome to Twilight Fables, where bedtime is a doorway and fairy tales are laced with shadows. Tonight, we wander into a home not meant to be found and a forest that watches as you trespass. This is the story of Goldilocks and the three bears, but not as you remember it. Settle in, keep your eyes open and listen closely. The path behind her had vanished. It wasn't that she'd taken a wrong turn or wandered too far. There simply was no path anymore. One moment it was there, winding between pines, so tightly packed they whispered to one another, and the next it was swallowed whole by roots and shadow. Goldilocks paused, one boot crunching into frost-covered leaves. She turned slowly, squinting back at the place she'd come from. There was no break in the underbrush, no trail, no sign that anything had ever guided her steps. Just an endless sprawl of trees, whose bark peeled like skin, and whose branches looked a little too much like fingers. She hadn't meant to go so deep. The town had been behind her, maybe 2 hours' walk, and she remembered leaving the last stretch of farmland, where wooden fences leaned drunkenly against the wild. Something had drawn her off the main road. A shape, maybe. A light flickering like lantern glow. She couldn't remember, only that she was here now, and she wasn't alone. The forest breathed, not in the way of wind, which was conspicuously absent, but in the way the ground subtly rose and fell beneath her boots. A sigh pushed between trees, and she smelled something damp and sweet. Not rot exactly, more like wet fur and honey gone sour. She turned forward again and stopped. There, nestled in a thicket of thorns and nettle, was a cottage. It rose out of the forest like a sawtooth, grey, crooked, sinking into the earth. Ivy strangled its stone walls, and its wooden door was split down the middle like something had clawed it open, and it had never quite healed. One shutter hung loose, creaking in a wind that didn't exist. Goldilocks felt the pull again, not physical, but not imagined either. She stepped toward it, boots crunching in the dead silence. The forest muffled behind her, as if holding its breath. The moment she reached the door, it opened on its own. Inside, the air was thick and warm, far too warm for the chill outside. It smelled like cinnamon, blood, and scorched hair. The floor was warped wood, dark with old stains that looked too red to be wine, too sticky to be paint. Shadows moved along the walls before her body could cast them. She stepped inside. The door groaned shut behind her. 3 bowls sat on a table. That much was true, but the table was not right. It slouched in the middle like something heavy had sat there too long. Its legs were gnarled and wet-looking. The bowls were mismatched, one wooden and cracked, one pewter and pitted, and one porcelain with a jagged chip that reminded her of a missing tooth. The food inside each steamed, though she hadn't heard any cooking. The steam smelled different from bowl to bowl. She hovered over the wooden one first. The scent struck her with a wave of heat, spices, and something bitter. The second bowl smelled like cold metal and boiled meat. She leaned toward the third. The scent hit her like a memory she didn't have. Warm milk, bread soaked in honey, and something else. The scent of old paper and cradle wood. She dipped a finger in and touched it to her lips. It was perfect, but not just perfect in taste. It made something inside her click, like a tumbler in a lock. Her heartbeat slowed. Her limbs felt heavy and warm, like someone had wrapped her in a weighted blanket. The room pulsed. The walls shifted. She blinked, and the cottage looked subtly different, darker, bigger. She heard a creak from the floor above. Goldilocks looked up. A single stairwell curved into the ceiling like a spine. From the shadows above, something shifted again. She swore she saw movement, slow, deliberate, but when she blinked, it was gone. "Hello," she said. Her voice sounded wrong here, too loud. It echoed, then didn't. She looked back at the bowls. The first had started to rot. Mould bloomed on the surface like bruises. The second one's contents had congealed. The third was gone. She hadn't eaten it all. She was sure of that. But the bowl sat empty now, rocking slightly. The rocking stopped. A chill slipped across the floor. She turned, too slowly, and caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror across the room. But the mirror didn't reflect her. Not exactly. The figure was wrong. Its hair too long. Its eyes black. The mirror cracked. Goldilocks ran. She bolted up the stairs, each step groaning as though in pain. The second floor was darker, colder. The walls bled wallpaper like flesh shedding skin. A hallway stretched before her, 3 doors on either side, one at the end. She opened the first. Inside was a chair, nothing else. But the moment her foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind her. The light bulb above flickered, and the chair moved. No, rocked, back and forth, empty. She pressed herself to the door. It wouldn't open. Behind her, the chair creaked to a stop. Then it creaked again, but now as if something sat in it, breathing, heavy, wet. Goldilocks closed her eyes. The breathing grew louder. Goldilocks didn't dare turn around. It rasped, laboured and animalistic, like lungs struggling under the weight of something too large. Every breath ended with a faint, clicking sound, like claws tapping together just once. Her palms pressed hard against the cold wood of the door. It refused to move, as if the cottage itself held it shut. Then the chair creaked again, only this time it didn't stop. Back and forth, back and forth. She took a breath, slow and silent, and counted to 3. If she stayed frozen, it would go away. That's what her grandmother used to say about nightmares. Don't feed them your fear, dear. Just close your eyes and pretend you're made of stone. But Goldilocks was made of flesh and fear and bone, and the thing behind her knew it. The rocking stopped. Then came the sound of something rising, not feet, too many limbs, scraping, clicking, a slow thud against the floor, like an elbow dragging a heavy body forward. She turned. The chair was empty, but there were claw marks in the floor, long, dark gouges that hadn't been there before. They led from the chair to her. The door burst open behind her as if pushed by some unseen force, and she stumbled backward into the hallway. The air outside the room had changed, sharper now, colder. There was no light bulb above her anymore, only a flickering candle mounted to the wall, wax dribbling like blood down the iron sconce. She didn't waste time with the second or third door. She sprinted down the hallway, straight for the one at the end, the one slightly ajar. Behind her, something moved. The sound was wet, scraping, slithering and huffing, like breath forced through teeth. She pushed into the room and slammed the door shut behind her. This room was different. It looked untouched. Dust hung in the air like powdered bone, but nothing felt rotted or blood-stained here. The bed was neatly made, a threadbare canopy draped overhead. A nightstand sat beside it, holding a small glass jar filled with teeth. She didn't stare long enough to count them. Instead, she crossed the room to the far wall, where a tall, strange mirror leaned slightly forward, too tall for the space. Its frame was etched with carvings of bears, in varying stages of decay. Some stood proud on two legs, regal and strong. Others slouched, hollowed out, their fur falling away in clumps to reveal bone and rot. She glanced at her reflection. It didn't look quite right. Her hair was the same, her eyes, but her smile. She wasn't smiling, and yet the girl in the mirror was. Slowly, unnaturally, it was an invitation. Goldilocks turned away. She reached for the nightstand drawer. Something inside buzzed, like a swarm of flies trapped under glass. When she opened it, the buzzing stopped, and the drawer was empty, save for a single folded note. She unfolded it. She came in, uninvited. She tried the bowl, she tried the chair, and now she sleeps in someone else's bed. One of them wakes first. The others are hungry. Close your eyes, little trespasser. They're coming. The candle in the hallway flickered out. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, measured. One step, pause, another. The floor groaned under the weight. Whatever it wasn't running. It didn't need to. It knew she was trapped. Goldilocks darted to the bed and ducked beneath it. The moment she did, the door creaked open. Bare feet stepped into the room. Long, hairy toes. Too many joints in each foot. The floor booed beneath their weight. Then another pair joined it. Smaller, clawed, twitching. A third followed, silent but dripping something onto the wooden floorboards. 3 shapes. They didn't speak, just sniffed and waited. Goldilocks covered her mouth with both hands. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her lungs tightening. Above her, the bed springs groaned as something climbed onto the mattress. She could hear it settling in, shifting weight from side to side, the bed frame screaming with the pressure. Then it stilled. Sniff, sniff. One of them crouched beside the bed. She saw the claws first, hooked and yellowed, tapping lightly on the floorboards. Then came the breathing, close, too close. Hot breath brushed her face through the mattress slats. and something whispered, not words, just breath, just presence. Then, as suddenly as they had entered, the footsteps receded. One by one, they left the room. Goldilocks waited. She didn't move for what felt like hours, only when the light from the hallway began to flicker again. This time a dull green. Did she crawl out from beneath the bed? The door was wide open now. The hallway had changed. No longer wooden walls and wallpaper. Now it was stone, damp and veined with mould. Torches burned along the walls in place of candles, their flames swaying with a wind that didn't touch her skin. And at the far end of the hall was something new. A spiral staircase, descending, as though the house had grown roots into the earth. She looked behind her once. The mirror no longer showed her reflection. Only the bed, only the empty chair, only the 3 bowls, untouched, waiting. And then a blink, and the mirror shattered from within. She didn't look back again. The mirror had cracked in silence, but the sound lingered in her mind, like a scream never heard, a pressure behind her eyes, a vibration in her teeth. Something inside her whispered not to think too hard about it. Thinking invites remembering. Remembering invites them. The staircase beckoned. It spiraled downward into darkness that seemed deeper than mere shadow, thick and tangible, like a fog made from sleep and rot. Goldilocks stepped onto the first stair, and it moaned beneath her weight, not with protest, but pleasure. The torchlight above flickered in warning, and then extinguished entirely. Darkness swallowed the world. For a moment, there was nothing, only her breath and the rhythmic creaking of her descent. But then, sound returned, not loud, not sudden, just soft, like whispering. Dozens of voices humming behind stone. They didn't speak words, not at first, just the low, murky murmurs of things trying to remember how to be human. She tried to descend faster, but the stairs resisted. Each step down felt heavier than the last, like her legs were sinking into tar. She gripped the cold stone wall for balance, but it pulsed under her fingertips, damp and veined like flesh just beneath the skin. At last, after what felt like hours, the stairs ended. Goldilocks stepped into a room that should not have existed, an enormous underground chamber, circular and cathedral-like, with towering roots crawling along its ceiling like veins in a skull. In the centre stood a long wooden table set for a feast, and the chairs were full. She stopped. The guests did not turn to look at her. They were frozen in the middle of dining, but none of them moved. Some sat upright with spoons halfway to their mouths. Others had faces dipped into bowls, unmoving, unmoved. Their skin looked waxy, too smooth. Their eyes were open. One of them, a little girl with golden curls and a blue dress, looked exactly like her. Exactly. Same eyes, same clothes, same split in the hem of her skirt. Only the skin was wrong. too pale, like porcelain left in a cellar. Her hands rested stiffly around a spoon, and her mouth was open in a silent gasp. Goldilocks staggered backward. There was a name carved into the chair where the wax girl sat. "Third try." Behind her a voice spoke, high, delicate, childlike. "You finally made it further than the rest." Goldilocks turned. A little girl stood at the edge of the chamber, barefoot and ragged, her hair falling in long, matted tangles. She held a teddy bear in one hand, worn so thoroughly its stuffing showed through the seams. But the bear had teeth, long, crooked teeth, that protruded from a maw where its stitched mouth should have been. The girl smiled. "I'm glad. They're very bored of the ones who fail too fast. The porridge wasn't quite right. The chair was too soft. The bed too cold. Always a reason to leave." Her eyes flicked toward the feast. "But you stayed. You tried." Goldilocks didn't know what to say. The girl tilted her head. "Do you know what this place is?" Goldilocks shook her head. "It's the bowl." The girl gestured wide with her arms. "This is the true taste test. You're not being tested by them. You're testing yourself. All those empty houses, all those chances to leave, but you didn't. You kept going. You needed more." She stepped closer. "You're hungry too." Goldilocks backed away, but the room had shifted. The walls pulsed. The table grew longer. The guests' eyes began to move, slowly, tracking her. "Do you know what they do to those who pass the test?" The girl whispered. She pointed toward the end of the table. Goldilocks turned. The last seat was empty. Carved into the wood was a new name, Goldilocks. She stared at it, frozen, then felt hands, dozens of tiny, waxy hands gripping her arms and legs. The feast had awakened. The wax guests smiled now, their jaws unhinged like snakes, and porridge spilled from their mouths, thick and black, reeking of burnt sugar and rot. Goldilocks screamed, but the table pulled her closer. The little girl watched, smiling with pity. "Next time," she said, "don't eat what isn't yours." Then the chamber was darkness again, and silence, except for the creak of one more chair being filled. It began with a knock, faint, hollow, not against wood, but glass. Goldilocks gasped awake. She sat upright, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. The underground feast, the waxy hands, the table stretching into the dark. It was gone. She was no longer beneath the house. She was somewhere new. The room was round, small, and suffocating. Walls curved inward, sloping like a silo or grain bin. Every surface was smooth and whitewashed, like an abandoned nursery, painted over too many times. No doors, no windows, just the mirror across from her, and her reflection, not quite right. Goldilocks stood slowly, legs trembling, and walked toward the glass. Her reflection didn't follow, it watched. Behind her own eyes, something else blinked. There were shadows in the mirror, behind the not Goldilocks. A table, a chair, a bowl of porridge steaming faintly. It was all so familiar. Then the knock came again from inside the glass. She backed away. The reflection smiled. A voice echoed from the walls, warped by the curved room, high-pitched and sing-song. First the bowl, then the bed, now the house inside your head. Goldilocks spun. The voice had no source, but it vibrated through the air like a lullaby stretched too thin. A faint sound followed, like claws on tile. She turned back to the mirror. Her reflection was gone, and behind the glass, something moved. The shadows inside the mirror deepened, shifting like fog. Shapes emerged. A bear-shaped silhouette, slow and dragging. Then another and another, but they weren't upright. They crawled, twisted, their limbs bent wrong, and their fur was too thin in places, exposing waxy flesh that gleamed like the guests from the table. A sound escaped one of them, a breathless, hungry wheeze. Too hot, one of them whispered. Too cold, came the echo. Just right, breathed the last. The glass cracked. Goldilocks scrambled away, pressing herself against the opposite wall. The mirror didn't shatter. It peeled like old skin, curling inward to reveal a tunnel. Not clean, not lit, just a dark throat of rotting wood and flickering candlelight. From the tunnel, the bears emerged, but they weren't bears, not anymore. One was massive, its arms longer than they should be, dragging claws that scraped and sparked against the floor. It moved with a limp, but its snout twitched, sniffing the air. The second was smaller, hunched, its head too round, its smile wide and cracked like a broken mask. Porridge dripped from its chin. The third stood tallest, skin patchy with molted fur. Its eyes were too human, familiar, too familiar. They stared directly at her. You ate, it said in her own voice. Goldilocks turned to run, but the walls of the room had changed. They rippled, melted, forming into soft folds and rounded corners. The shape of a mouth. The house was eating itself. No, it was swallowing her. The floor gave way. She fell, not into darkness, into light, blinding white light, blinking fluorescence, a cold surface beneath her. Goldilocks opened her eyes to find herself strapped to a metal bed. The ceiling above her was made of glass, and behind it, shadows watched. She tried to scream. A speaker crackled above her. A voice came through, old, rasping, male. She's awake. Log the data. Trial 47. Patient Goldilocks. A second voice, tired, female, replied. Still no memory retention. Emotional response stable. Shall we begin the next phase? Yes. Reintroduce the bear sequence. Increase psychological persistence. She's still resisting. Goldilocks struggled, thrashing in her restraints. The shadows behind the glass leaned closer. One of them smiled. A face with eyes like hers. The speaker buzzed again. Let's see how far she gets this time. And the world began to melt again. There was no transition, no falling, no rising, just being. One moment, Goldilocks lay in a cold metal bed, screaming behind glass. The next, she was standing on the edge of a mist-soaked forest clearing, barefoot, her dress torn and damp with dew. No sky above, only a swirling canopy of grey clouds that shifted like breath on a mirror. And in the centre of the clearing stood the cottage. The cottage. It looked the same, quaint, timber-framed, flowers spilling from window boxes, smoke curling lazily from the crooked chimney. It smelled like cinnamon and wet pine, but she didn't trust it. Her stomach twisted, her bare feet dug into the mossy ground, toes curling instinctively as if expecting it to disappear. She turned to run, and behind her was nothing. No trees, no sky, just blankness, as if the world hadn't loaded yet. She was trapped in a diorama. Goldilocks looked again at the cottage. There were footprints on the stoop, 3 sets, large, medium, small, impossibly precise, etched as if stamped by machine. A memory stirred, or was it a dream? Something told her she'd been here before, many times, too many times. She stepped forward. The door creaked open before she touched it. The scent of porridge flooded out, strong, almost chemical, like a scented candle rather than real food. It made her gag. Inside, the cottage was immaculate. The table set, 3 bowls waiting, the same as always, but they weren't steaming, they were smoking. Thin, curling trails of grey rose from the bowls like incense, winding through the rafters toward a hole in the ceiling that hadn't been there before. The smoke pulsed, alive, forming vague shapes in the air, claws, teeth, grins too wide to belong to animals. Goldilocks didn't want to move forward, but her feet disobeyed her. She stepped to the table, sat. The spoon lifted itself. She screamed. Her mouth opened on its own. The porridge, black, tar-like, slid down her throat. Each bite twisted something inside her. The room shifted. The walls stretched. The fireplace roared. From upstairs, a familiar creak. Not footsteps, not exactly. Wait, a dragging sound. She stood up and bolted toward the front door, but it was gone. Just wallpaper where it should have been, printed with a crude image of a forest. Goldilocks spun. The bowls were gone now too. So was the table. Only the staircase remained, rising impossibly high, its steps dark and breathing. Something up there was waiting, but something behind her was moving too, slow and wet, like footsteps made of syrup. She turned. One of the bears, the smallest, was emerging from the wall. Its face flickered like bad reception. Its body bled into the floor, half-formed, as if someone had paused mid-drawing. Too soft, it whispered, though its mouth never moved. Goldilocks ran, up the stairs. Each step pulsed underfoot like muscle. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but her body didn't tire. The hallway at the top was longer than the house could hold. Door after door stretched into the distance, each identical. White paint, brass knob, a child's name carved into the frame. Lucy, George, Margot, Edgar, Clara, and then Goldilocks. She hesitated. From within that door, she heard a lullaby, warped, slurred. This one's too hard, this one's too soft. Her hand reached for the knob. It turned on its own. Inside was a nursery, a crib, a rocking chair, toys strewn across the floor, and in the crib, a child, blonde hair, pale skin. It looked like her. It opened its eyes, and they were black. They made me, it said, out of your leftovers. Goldilocks backed away, trembling. You kept breaking, the child said, so they made me stronger. The walls pulsed. The rocking chair rocked by itself. From behind her, something enormous exhaled. Goldilocks turned slowly. The mother bear stood in the doorway, no longer twisted or rotting, but pristine, perfect, human-sized, dressed in a clean apron, her eyes gentle, but her mouth opened too wide. Inside was a cavern of teeth. Time for bed, she whispered. The child in the crib giggled. The room went dark, and Goldilocks fell again. She landed on something soft. At first, she thought it was grass, damp and springy beneath her. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized she was lying on fur, a great carpet of fur. The air buzzed with stillness. Not quiet, stillness, as though sound itself had been swallowed. Goldilocks sat up. The world had changed again. She was in a massive room with no ceiling, just endless shadow above. The walls were lined with tall mirrors, each reflecting distorted versions of her, warped and elongated like figures in a carnival funhouse. In one, she had no eyes. In another, no mouth. In a third, she was smiling, really smiling, but the rest of her face didn't match. The fur beneath her pulsed once, like a sleeping thing, and then fell still. She stood slowly. There was no door, no windows, just the mirrors, and then a sound. Tick, tick, tick. She turned. In the centre of the room now stood a table. She hadn't seen it appear. On it, a box, old, wooden, carved with symbols that danced when she looked directly at them. The ticking came from inside. Compelled, she stepped forward and lifted the lid. Inside were 3 playing cards. One bore the image of a bed, the second a bowl, the third a chair. The cards rearranged themselves, shuffling with a dry whisper. Words bloomed across them, one too big, one too small, one just right. She blinked. The table was gone. She was alone again, or so she thought, until she noticed a figure watching from one of the mirrors. It was her, but not her. This version moved independently, lips twitching into a grin. Her skin was slightly darker, her eyes gleaming with something feral. The not her raised a hand and pointed, Goldilocks turned. Another door had appeared behind her. She didn't trust it, but the room began to shrink, the walls pressing inward, the mirrors groaning, the fir floor quivering as if in pain. She ran through the door, into another room. This one was smaller, like a child's playroom. Toys littered the floor, blocks spelled out nonsensical words. A jack-in-the-box played a broken tune in the corner, slowly winding itself. In the centre sat a bear, not a real one, a stuffed toy, but its eyes were glassy, too lifelike. It turned its head as she entered. "You're late," it said. Goldilocks stopped cold. "The others played fair," the bear said, voice gravelly. "Will you?" "What do you want?" she asked. "Same as always," it growled. "Three choices, one path." The floor peeled away, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. "Go down," the bear said, "or stay and be part of the game." She backed toward the stairs. "Careful," it whispered, "you already lost once." Her foot touched the first step. She descended. Each step was sticky, like walking down a throat. The air grew warmer, wetter. The walls pulsed. At the bottom, she found another door. This one was bone white and pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. She reached for the handle, and it grabbed her. It wasn't a handle at all. It was a hand, thin, grey with too many knuckles. She screamed and tried to pull away, but it held tight. "You've tasted the porridge," it rasped. "Now taste the truth." The door opened on its own. Inside, a dining room, familiar. 3 bears sat at the table, but their faces were stitched on, thread and buttons, like someone's idea of what a bear should look like. Their heads turned as one. "Welcome home," they said in unison. Goldilocks couldn't breathe. The chair pulled itself back, inviting her to sit, and she realised the chair, the bowl, the bed, they weren't just furniture, they were roles, things to be filled. She was never a guest. She was the missing piece. She sat. The bears smiled wider, and the walls began to close in again. The walls didn't stop closing. They kept pressing inward, slow, steady, silent, like they had all the time in the world. Goldilocks stood too quickly, the chair scraping backward with a sound like tearing skin. The bears didn't move. Their stitched faces remained frozen in that too wide smile, eyes unblinking, but they were watching. She backed away. The bowl in front of her steamed with something that smelled like rot and cinnamon. "Eat," said the middle bear, the one in the mother's seat. Goldilocks shook her head. "I'm not hungry." The father bear rose, not all at once, piece by piece, like a puppet being pulled upright by tangled strings. "You were hungry once," he said. His voice was thick, syrupy, and wrong. The walls shuddered. The room began to hum, a deep, vibrating sound that she could feel in her bones. The bears stood together now. 3 shadows stretched long behind them, taller than the walls, taller than they should be. "Sit," they said as one. She turned and ran through the wall. Not a door. There was no door, but the wood gave way as though she were being swallowed again. Splinters kissed her arms and cheeks as she fell forward, tumbling into another room. She landed on a bed. Of course, it was too soft. The mattress sank under her, folding her in like warm dough. She screamed and tried to push herself free, but the bed clung to her, wet, elastic, and alive. Something moved beneath her. Then a whisper near her ear. "Not just right, little thief." The room tilted. Suddenly she was falling sideways, tossed from the bed like a broken toy. She hit the floor hard, got up slower this time. She was in a hallway now, impossibly long, lined with hundreds of doors, some open, some cracked, some sealed shut with thick black vines. From one, she heard sobbing, from another, scratching, from a third, laughter, but not the kind she wanted to follow. She walked. The hallway never ended. Every few feet, the floor changed. Hardwood, then stone, then wet fur, then tiles that clicked beneath her step. She kept walking until a door opened by itself. No sound, just a quiet click, and then space where there had been none. It led to a nursery, rocking chair in the corner, cradle by the window. No baby, just a mobile turning overhead. 3 figures spinning gently in the air. A bear, a girl, a golden spoon. As it turned, the figures twisted. The girl became a doll. The doll became a bone. The bone became part of the chair. The mobile stopped. The cradle creaked. Goldilocks stepped forward, against every instinct. Inside the cradle, a mirror. Her own face stared back, but her reflection was crying. She touched the glass. Her reflection moved after she did. Delayed. Wrong. Then it smiled and opened its mouth. A key fell from its lips onto the glass. She picked it up, hand trembling. It was warm. From behind her, the bears' voices echoed faintly. "You're remembering now?" She turned. The room had changed again. Now she stood in a study. Walls of books, but the titles shifted when she tried to read them. A fireplace burned blue. No heat. The key pulsed in her hand. There was a single drawer in the desk, locked. She fit the key in. It clicked. Inside, a journal, bound in the same stitched leather as the bears' faces. She opened it. Blank. Then slowly, ink began to appear, scrawling across the page as if written by an invisible hand. She came to take what was not hers. She ate. She sat. She slept. Now she remembers what she truly is. Not a guest, not a thief, a piece. Tears filled her eyes. This wasn't just a house. It was her. Her memories, her guilt, her fear, her hunger, all twisted and dressed in fur and wood and shadows. "Goldilocks," a voice said behind her. She turned. The smallest bear stood there, the child, but its eyes were endless voids. "You left me behind," it whispered, and she remembered. not all at once, but in fragments. The crying baby, the locked room, the one she hadn't saved. "I didn't know," she whispered. The child reached for her. "You do now." And when their hands touched, the room fell away. The fall wasn't physical. There was no ground to crash into, no tree limbs to snap on the way down. Just darkness, thick as syrup, swallowing everything. Her breath, her thoughts, her name, until her eyes opened. She lay in the forest again. Same crooked trees, same blood-red sky, same silence, too deep to be natural. But the house was gone. No clearing, no twisted roof, just soil and roots, gnarled as fists. Goldilocks sat up slowly. Her body ached. Her fingers were scraped. Her hair smelled of smoke and old wood. The key was gone, but she still remembered all of it. The house had been hers once, or maybe a version of her, the part she'd locked away, the part that had always wanted too much, warmth, comfort, attention, but never knew how to ask. The bears weren't guardians, they were boundaries, broken ones. A noise behind her made her flinch. She turned fast, expecting fur, teeth, something stitched and grinning. Instead, there was a girl, small, pale, wearing a yellow dress, smudged with soot. She looked exactly like Goldilocks, but younger. They stared at each other. Then the girl asked, "Are you me?" Goldilocks didn't answer because she wasn't sure anymore. Instead, she held out a hand. The child didn't take it. She pointed instead toward the trees behind her. Goldilocks looked. There, in the forest's mouth, sat a new house, simpler, smaller, and waiting. Goldilocks stepped forward, one foot crunching on the brittle remains of the past. She didn't remember building it, but she knew she had to go in. The door opened without touch. Inside, 3 chairs, 3 bowls, 3 beds, all untouched, dustless, clean. But this time, no bears, only echoes, and her. She walked the room slowly. Each one whispered memories back to her. The times she took, the things she thought she deserved, the family she abandoned, the trust she broke. It was all in the wood, the grain, the quiet. In the final room, she found the mirror again. It was cracked now, but behind the fracture she saw her own eyes, steady, a little older, a little wiser, and not alone, because in the reflection the 3 bears stood behind her, still, silent, not threatening, not smiling, just watching. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Instead, she faced herself and whispered, "I'm sorry." The mirror shivered, then melted, not into liquid, but into light. It poured over her like rain, soaking through her skin, through her bones, through the rot in her chest that had grown over all these years. When it was gone, so were the bears, so was the house, so was the forest. She was standing in a clearing under a grey sky, normal trees, a breeze, birds, actual birds, sang in the distance. She turned around, no path, no door, No signs of what had just happened, but she felt different, like she had been emptied and filled at once. Not cured, not healed, but aware. Goldilocks took a breath, then began to walk, not to find home, but to make one. This time, not by taking, but by building from what was left.